Thank you for joining me. My name is Mark Fittipelli. I'm a New York-based attorney and the owner of MDF Law, a national law firm with offices in New York and California. I'm here today to talk with investors who invested and may have lost money in Inspired Healthcare Capital. And Inspired Healthcare Capital is an investment sponsor of various different real estate related investments, all of which, for the most part, invested in senior housing investments throughout the United States. The company recently filed for bankruptcy, and if you invested in one of their offerings, you may have received a notification from the bankruptcy court, or you may have received a notification from your investor, and you may have questions about the investment. And what I hope to do in this video is answer some of those basic questions for you, answer some questions about the bankruptcy, but also answer questions for you about what your legal recourse might be to recover money outside of the bankruptcy. And before I get into all of that, I just want to give you a quick disclaimer. And my disclaimer is that this is attorney advertising. And to the extent that you need legal advice, you should contact your own attorney. This is just educational, and you should just rely on this just for education. So with that being said, I want to give you a quick background on Inspired Healthcare Capital. So like I said, Inspired Healthcare Capital was an investment sponsor, and as an investment sponsor, they sold various investment funds that invested in senior housing developments. What was unique about this company is that it offered these not through an IPO process, but through something that securities attorneys like me call a Regulation D offering. It's also called a private investment or a private placement or an exempt offering. All of these terms of art mean that when Inspired Healthcare Capital offered its various investment funds to investors, it didn't file an IPO, and it didn't have the Securities and Exchange Commission looking over its financials, looking at the statements that it was making to investors. And that's the main difference between an IPO and a private investment. And so for that reason, when investors invest in private investments like the funds that were offered by Inspired Healthcare Capital, it's especially important that they conduct due diligence, right? Think about it. If the Securities and Exchange Commission isn't looking at the things that the investment sponsor is saying to investors, well, someone has to, right? It's very important then in that situation that someone's keeping the investment sponsor honest. Because when investment sponsors do Regulation D offerings, all they're doing is they're filing one page with the Securities and Exchange Commission, just putting them on notice that they're doing the offering. They're not giving them any information about what they're telling investors, and so no one is verifying their claims. And so because they're allowed to sell securities like that, the law has a caveat. And the caveat to the law is you can't go directly to the markets with this. You have to have a broker-dealer that's licensed to be involved. And so when you bought your investment through Inspired Healthcare Capital, you purchased it through someone who held a securities license, and that person who held a securities license received a commission. And the commission that they received was received in exchange for them doing something more than just placing you in the investment. And under our securities regulations, when you buy an investment like Inspired Healthcare Capital, the broker or the person who puts you in the investment is legally required to do due diligence. And the due diligence that they do exists and is mandated because think about what I told you. The Securities and Exchange Commission isn't here to verify what the investment sponsor is saying. So in these situations, when you get that big, thick private placement memorandum from Inspired Healthcare, you're not expected to read it, and you're not expected to know every word in it. By law, the party that's expected to read it and understand every word in it is the broker that received the commission. And what they're required to do is they're required to do quote unquote reasonable due diligence. And what that means is they're required to do what any broker dealer in the industry would do in their shoes, right? You want to look at the financials of the sponsor, you want to look at their track record, you want to look at their other deals. And so with an investment like Inspired Healthcare Capital, what we do as a law firm is we look at the disclosures that exist at the time the investor was put in the investment, and we pick apart the investment. We say no reasonable broker would have offered this product because of X, Y, and Z. And right now you're probably asking yourself, well, what's wrong with Inspired Healthcare Capital and what's X, Y, and Z? What's the case that you're building against Inspired Healthcare? And the case against Inspired Healthcare for me is more than just about missing distributions, right? When you read about the company, you'll read a lot of articles, especially articles from other attorneys talking about missed distributions. For me, the smoking gun against Inspired Healthcare Capital is a lawsuit that was filed in September 2025 by a company called Emerson Equity. And Emerson Equity is a broker-dealer. They're one of the firms that I referenced earlier that sold Inspired Healthcare Capital. They were a firm that sold Inspired Healthcare funds to their clients. They sued Inspired because they themselves lent Inspired money. And in their lawsuit, they allege that Inspired lied to them about their financials. And so for me, that's a huge smoking gun that one of the companies that's working with Inspired to sell the funds to their own investors is suing Inspired, claiming that they're lying to them. So that happened immediately before the bankruptcy in the fall. And I think as a result of that litigation, a lot of investors came forward, and Inspired at that point began preparing for their bankruptcy, and they subsequently filed for bankruptcy early this year. If you're watching this, I'm filming this video in February 2026, and Inspired just filed bankruptcy several weeks prior. So, now that they have filed for bankruptcy, as an investor, what are your options? And you have two basic options to recover your money if you invested in an Inspired fund. Number one is you could recover your money through litigation or an arbitration against the salesperson who sold you the product. And I could help you with one of those litigations, and my firm does those on contingency. And the basis of that claim would be as described, that the person who sold you the products didn't do adequate due diligence on the investment. And you also could potentially argue in those cases that these investments weren't appropriate for you. Under the securities laws, the broker-dealers have to also conduct due diligence on you as an investor, right? So just because this investment may be a good private investment doesn't mean it's a good private investment for everyone, right? There are some investors that just should never invest in private investments just because of their background. If you don't have a certain amount of liquidity, you just shouldn't invest in these types of investments. So that's the first type of case, and that case would be filed against your investor. The second path of recovery is something that I cannot help you with, but I'll describe to you. That's recovery through the bankruptcy court. And what you will eventually receive is you'll receive notification in the mail through the bankruptcy court about what to do and what to file. And the court should give you very clear instructions about filing a proof of claim. And if you're an investor in a fund, that should be all that you need to do to claim money in the bankruptcy is file a proof of claim. If you have just an ordinary investment and your case is uncomplicated and you're like the thousands of other investors throughout the country, you'll get that information in the mail about the proof of claim deadline and you'll file one. And when you get that information in the mail from the bankruptcy court, you'll probably also get a phone number to call with questions, and you should call that phone number with questions. And if you get any mail from people claiming to be an attorney or claiming to be able to do something for you for money, you should be skeptical about it, and you should look them up and make sure that they're actually an attorney and that the claims that they're making for you about what they can do for you in the bankruptcy court are true. Just do that little bit of due diligence. So, that's my update. That's my update on the bankruptcy. That's my discussion on what your legal options are and what your basis is for bringing a claim against your broker dealer. If you have any questions about Inspired Healthcare Capital, I'm happy to answer them. You can call me at 1-800-786-8040, or you could send me an email. Thank you.